Hi, this is Dan from Hello Music Theory. In this series, I'm going through some of the questions that could come up in an ABRSM Grade 1 Music Theory exam. In today's video, we're going to take a look at letter names and the degrees of the scale. So there are two types of question that ABRSM might ask you about this. The first one is where you have to give the letter name of each of the notes marked with a star. And then you'll have an extract of music like we have here with stars above, little spaces for you to write in the letter names below. And then you have to just go through and answer and work out what the letter names are. So we've got the first one will always be done for you already, which is useful to know. And then you have to go through and say what the notes are. Now, this bit here in the question, it says including the sharp sign where necessary. So if the key signature that you're in, this one here is in G major because it has one sharp. If it has a sharp in it, it will always say including the sharp sign where necessary. If the extract of music was in F major, for example, F major has one flat. So the question in that case would say including the flat sign where necessary. And if it was in C major doesn't have any sharps or flats, so it wouldn't tell you to include the sharp sign. So they won't try and trick you by maybe saying include the sharp sign when necessary when it's in C major. They're always going to make it as simple as possible for you. So for this one, you just really need to learn the treble, the notes, or the names of the notes in the treble and the bass clef. That's the first thing to do really. So you just have to go through and answer the names of them, and just be sure to remember to write in the sharp. So this one's an F sharp if it is a sharp note. I've got some flashcards actually on the website. I'll put a link in the description to this video, which will help you learn the names of the notes. But yeah, that's a tricky thing. In the next example, it's going to be a little bit, I can explain a little bit of a cheat or a hack to help you work out the answer a little easier. But for this one, I'm afraid you're just going to have to learn the notes, which is tough at first, but you'll get it. Anyway, there's two things to remember about this. Again, as I said, they won't tell you the key that it's in. So you need to work out, tell you the key. You need to work out what key you're in, because that's going to be really useful, especially when you need to include the F sharps like this. If you just wrote F, you'd get it wrong. So you always need to be conscious of what key you're in and what the key signature is. The second thing is they'll always tell you if, as I said earlier, if there is a sharp or a flat. They'll remind you, tell you if it has a sharp or a flat. They'll remind you that you need to include it. Okay, so they're not trying to trick you out or make you get it wrong on purpose. So the other type of question to do with letter names and degrees of the scale is where you have to name the degree of the scale, second, third, fourth, etc., of each of the notes marked with a star. The first answer is given and the key is D major. So the useful thing about this is they'll always tell you what key you're in. Okay, so they'll always tell you what key you're in. So the last question, they won't tell you what key you're in. But on this one, where it's to do with degrees of the scale, they'll always tell you what key we're in, which is useful. And the thing to do here is you'll get a little bit of scrap paper in your exam, a little bit of manuscript scrap paper. So what I really recommend doing is writing out the scale of D major. So we're just going to write out the 8 notes of D major scale. So the first note is D, and we've got E, we've got an F sharp, because there's 2 sharps in D major. We've got a G, A, B, a C sharp, and then lastly the octave above of the D. And then number these notes. So just number what the order they're in. So we've got 1, 2, F sharp is 3, 4, 5. Get the idea. Really simple. Just number those notes, and this is going to help massively when it comes to answering the questions. Now, again, they've completed the first one for us, so we can ignore that, and we need to find where the second note is, and then answer that. So this one here is a G. Which is the first line of the bass clef. So we need to find where G is in our scale. Now G is the 4th note of the scale. So that means that all we need to do here is write in 4th below. It's really that easy. And we're just going to keep going. So let me keep that as 4th. The next note here is a B, the second line in the bass clef from the bottom. We find where B is in our D major scale. It's the 6th note. So then we write in 6th. Okay? Hopefully you're getting the idea of it. Here we've got a C sharp, so let's look at our scale. Where is C sharp? It's the 7th note, so we can just write in number 7 followed by TH for the 7th, and we just keep going. Here we've got an F sharp. F sharp is the 3rd, right in 3rd, or just almost there. Here we've got a low E, so E is the 2nd note of the scale, so we write in the 2nd. Then we've got a high B, which again is the 6th. Almost there, 2 to go. Here we've got an A, which is the 5th. And then lastly, to finish, we've got a D, which is obviously going to be the 1st. Oh, that's an interesting thing to say. Yeah, you never would write the 8th when you're doing an example like this. It's always going to be the 1st. So we can actually cross that off there. It will never be the 8th. In the question, in the next week's video, we're going to be looking at intervals. It could be an interval of an 8th, or 8 VE is how you also can write it, but never in this question where we're giving the degrees of the scale. Okay, so there's going to be 8 of those that we just did in each question. So actually, let's have another look back. You see there's 8 asterisks, 8 stars here with 8 things we need to fill out. So each of those is worth 1 point. But this question altogether will be worth 10 points. So just as a follow-on, there'll always be a little follow-on question at the end of the extract for you to answer, which is going to be worth 2 marks. Now, I've looked over a lot of the grade 1 past papers, about 7-8 years worth of them, and there's 3 every year, and I've had a look through, and I've tried to analyse what sort of questions could come up, and I've narrowed it down to these kind of 5 different types of question. Now, there could be other ones in different years. I can't say for certain, but it's probably going to be one of a variation on one of these 5 types of question. So they'll ask you things like, how many times does a certain note occur? Now that could be, how many times does the 3rd note of the scale appear in the extract? How many times does the 7th? It could be any of the different degrees of the scale. And then you have to go through and count how many times that note appears, and then that would be the answer. Another way they might word this question is give the letter name of a certain note. So, for example, in the extract we've just done, where we're naming the degrees of the scale, you might have to then name the letter note of a note. So they might have like give the letter name of the 3rd degree of the scale, which if you're in F major would be A, for example, like that. There could be lots of things like that and variations on it. You might have to give the time name of a certain note. So give what is the time name of the 1st note in the extract, and it could be any of those notes, but it could be like that. By time note, I mean, is it a quaver? Is it a crotchet? Is it a semibreve? Is it a semiquaver? It could be any of those. That's another thing that they might ask. Let me just finish off writing crotchet. Another thing that I've seen, although it's not as common, especially in the later grades, is to draw a circle around 2 notes that are a certain interval apart. So in the next video, next week, we'll be looking at intervals, but for this one, you would have to draw around 2 consecutive notes that are next to each other. It could be a third, it could be any interval up to an octave, and then you'd have to draw a little circle around those 2 notes. And then lastly, they'll ask you things like how many quavers is a certain note worth. So they might, at the end of the extract or anywhere in the extract, they might have a semibreve or a minim, and they might ask you how many quavers is a semibreve or a minim worth. And so a minim would be worth 4 quavers. Semibreve would be worth 8 quavers, but they might also say things as well, semi-quavers. So they might say how many semi-quavers is a minim worth, how many semi-quavers is a dotted crotchet worth. It could be any of these, but I've narrowed it down to those 5 different variations. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I hope that's helped you make a bit more sense of that type of question. In the next video, next week, we're going to be looking at intervals and working out the 2 types of harmonic and melodic intervals. But if you have any questions about this video, feel free to drop me an email or pop a comment below and I'll get back to you. Thanks a lot.